today by discussing the classroom routine, and I teach in a middle school, and classroom routine is even important at that age. I think kids feel that they're in a predictable and safe environment when they have a set routine. So here is our daily routine at Penson School in a grade 7, 8, or 9 class. We start out our reading, start gathering with a reading that we're sharing. And this term, for example, we're reading a novel together called Speak. And Speak it was on the teacher's pick list at Cole's Bookstore, and the kids are really enjoying it so far. So we're doing shared reading, so I read some of it, and kids volunteer to read some of it. And shared reading lasts for probably about 10 minutes at the beginning of every class. Something new that I'm trying with shared reading is in order to help build fluency for all the kids in class, I'd like to get more of them involved. We always have a core 5 of them that always seem to volunteer to read aloud, but that's not really benefiting everybody fluency-wise. And usually the ones that do volunteer, they're very fluent anyway. So here's the strategy for developing fluency. I'm going to turn to an upcoming page in the book. I'm going to open this book up. I'm going to lay it on the photocopier, and I'm going to run 2 pages off. I'm going to give that photocopy to a student, and the student gets to take it home and do a practiced reading or a rehearsed reading of the text. Number 1, it takes a lot of pressure off of them. Nobody wants to stumble through the text. Number 2, even while they're reading, they need to be focusing on comprehension as well. And if we take that nervous edge off of them, they'll be able to focus on the text. Next up on our agenda, we have word work. And word work involves a short activity, probably 10 or 15 minutes, where we engage in some of the more grammatical aspects of language arts. For example, capitalization or punctuation, vocabulary building is key. Things like homonym confusion, sentence variety, sentence structuring. Again, it's not a whole class of activities like that. It's more of a 10 or 15 minute chunk of time that we focus on a specific skill, and not too many of them at once.
I sell the concept of grammar with books like this, Girls Like Spaghetti. It's a book about the apostrophe. It's a kid version of Eat Shoots and Leaves. I sell it to them with Eat Shoots and Leaves for Kids. It's all about comma. Have you seen these titles before? Yeah. And they really aren't above this, and they love it. When comma came to town, look at how. Let me see your writing. Let me see how it's going. Frequently, when I take a look at their writing, my word work is under control. I have it. I have no problems with authenticity because I've read their work. I know what the problem is. Now let's do 10 minutes of word work on it.
In the name of balanced literacy in this classroom, we aim to have a balance of both reading and writing. The Nielsen Literacy resource that I'm using this year provides opportunity for that balance, and equal time is spent both reading and writing. All right, with regard to the Nielsen Literacy resource, there are lots of opportunities in that resource for differentiated instruction. And I know that word kind of makes a lot of teachers cringe, and their first thought is, oh my Lord, you mean that I have to develop 4 or 5 different lesson plans for each kid? Not exactly. That's not how it works in this classroom. I figured out a way to do differentiated instruction and use the resource, and all in a doable way. And this is how I have it figured out. For example, I'll start with my grade 7 group here because the grade 8 and 9 group is laid out the same way. So we have, for the understanding strategy lessons, that's an assignment that everybody does together. It's a chance to learn to use the strategy that we present. For example, our first strategy that we really focused on had to do with making connections. So this is an assignment that I do a lot of modeled lesson teaching with. After they've completed the understanding strategies lesson, I use the demonstration task at the end and the key assessment questions to basically make a judgment whether they need to be in the category of a bird or a beast. What that basically means is I need to know which upcoming reading I need to direct them to. For example, does this next group need to read Resisting Hitler, which is the more difficult of the two? Or do they need to read Universal Soldier, which is least difficult of the two? Another thing that I'd like to show you about grouping students, sometimes students will really surprise you and they no longer need to be in the beast category. Or sometimes a bird will surprise you and they would be best fit into a different reading. That's why these are Velcro. You can move students around, and it implies that students are not in a fixed group, and I think it shows a lot of respect for the fact that they can grow and they can change, and just because you've been slotted into one category to start with doesn't mean you'll always have to stay in that category. And that's how I handle differentiated instruction with regards to Nelson literacy. My guided reading cart. This is something that I'm very proud of. Over the summer, I ordered a whole bunch of novel study 5-pack sets for my students. So when it comes to doing novel studies in the classroom, and I know so many teachers love them, and I think that's great, I have selected a number of books that are at a number of different levels, and they're all in 5 packs. And there are all lots of different levels of books. I want to show you an example here of what I mean by leveling these books. So we open up the back cover of the book here and it says GR level, so that's guided reading level, and it's a level Z book. Lexile level, 1060, and other, meaning it could be an interest level or it could be a grade level, whatever you'd like to write in there. Okay? So all of the books on my novel study cart have those tabs in them. This one is called Romanette and Julio, and it has it as well. So there are a few novel studies that I like to keep as whole sets for my class, but eventually this is what I want to move completely towards, because I think it's about finding a good fit book for a kid. The whole doing one novel with the whole class, well, it just doesn't fit everybody, and unfortunately the strong are getting stronger and the weak are getting weaker in a situation like that. And I think if we're to create kids who really embrace literacy, they've got to understand what they're reading, and our responsibility as professionals is to meet them where they're at. And this is my way of doing that. And now for the final thing that I'd like to share with you today, something that I'm probably most excited about in my classroom. I read a book called The Cafe, and a huge part of The Cafe was the idea of creating a pensive. And a teacher pensive, is somewhere where you store all of your important documents, your important thoughts. Here are some samples of student pensives that kids have created. As you can see, this one is Mike, and Mike loves snowboarding. He's decorated it. And this one is Brandon's, and Brandon has decorated his beautifully. And Adam's, apparently Adam loves California Girls. The individuality of a student pensive is absolutely key because then they own it. It's their document. You'll notice that in the student pensives, I've got them divided into 3 different sections. So there's a chunk of pages reserved for reading, a chunk of pages reserved for writing, and a chunk of pages used for representing. The reading section, when they do a reading response entry, students do a reading response entry, they do their entry based on whatever novel we're reading shared reading wise, or they do independent reading for 15 minutes and then 15 minutes of reading response. Okay? This reading response, well, I've noticed that the problem with reading response is that they can be pretty shallow, and the kids they tend to just want to relay the important details to you, and summarizing is only one strategy a good reader uses. So I've come up with this, it's called Connection Response Starters, and what they are stems to help them get their thinking started. So a few examples. This part or character reminds me of, at this point in the text, I predict, when I read this part, I visualize, and it goes on to explain a number of other connection stems. And I never ask kids to use one stem today. They have the liberty to choose the stem that they're going to use, and I think that's fairly respectful of the idea that good readers use a multiple of strategies all together, and they don't use them discreetly on their own. They use a multiple variety, so kids are allowed to choose whatever stem they want. For the writing section of the student pensives, I use this writing prompt book, and it's called If, Questions for Teens. And I like these questions, or these prompts, because they really encourage kids to think about their writing and think big thoughts. So here's what I'll do. I'll photocopy this page, and I'll email it to myself because our new printer could do that. And then I'll put these 4 prompts up on my smartboard, and I'll just read you a couple of them. If you were to predict what your generation will contribute to the world, what would you say? If you were to name a person you try to act most like, who would it be? If you were to name a belief that you hold that is different from all of your friends, what would it be? If there is one mistake you would like your generation not to repeat, what would it be? So they're critical thinking questions, and they're all through the book. And students are allowed to choose one of the 4 to respond to. I have a whole bunch of them. I can provide them with 1 page or 4 choices for their writing prompt. For the representing section of the student pensives, students are asked to represent their knowledge from reading, from something that's going on in school, whatever, from a different subject area, in the form of some sort of graphic organizer or in the form of a visual representation. So it gets kids using different ways to represent their understanding. Writing isn't the only way. You're probably thinking, well, does she mark all of these or what? Well, no, I don't mark all of them. Do I give feedback on them? You bet. So there's an example of the feedback that I've given to this student. There's some more feedback that I've given to this student in his writing section. And I can see him demonstrating knowledge that we've covered in class. For example, simple things like underlining titles. We covered that in the first week of school. He's doing it in his writing. So I think it's working, and his writing's interesting. So how do I keep track of all of these readings these entries that kids do? Well, turning to my Pensive entry form, you'll notice that there are 3 screaming bright yellow columns. And you'll notice that there are columns that don't have any yellow highlighting, but they have check marks instead. The check mark simply indicates that the Pensive entry was done. It was done, and I've commented on it, and I've given feedback on it. That's a way to assess as well. These bright yellow columns, at the end of the term, what I'm going to do, or probably a week or 2 before the term is out, I'm going to give the kids 3 little stickers. And they're going to be asked to select a reading entry, a writing entry, and a representing entry that they are particularly proud of. Redo the reading, writing, and representing entries till they're at the stage of publishable work, and put a sticker on those 3. Those are the ones that I will assess for marks for the report card. So students select what they are most proud of. No, everything doesn't get to publishing stage, but I don't think everything does need to get to publishing stage either. That, in short, are my Pensive entries for both myself and my kids.